Roll call.
Director Green?
Yes.
Director Anthony? Director Whitaker?
Present.
Director Vanderbilt?
Here.
Director Sarmiento? Director Duane?
I'm here.
Director Sheldon? Director Wynn? Director Yo? Director Bilodeau? You have a quorum.
Okay. Do we have any items to be announced?
There are none.
Okay. Anyone want to speak? We'll listen. Okay. Consent calendar. You have a motion on the consent calendar?
Move it. Second.
Okay. Director Green?
Yes.
Director Whitaker?
Yes.
Director Vanderbilt?
Yes.
Director Duane?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Okay. And then moving on to the adoption of the Integrated Regional Water Management Plan for North and Central Orange County.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Greg Woodside will be presenting to the committee this morning.
Good morning. For Integrated Regional Water Management Plans, or IRWM plans, we're looking at two in our region. So the bigger watershed has one that's been developed by SAPA that's referred to as the OWOW plan. And then we're bringing to you what's sometimes called a sub-regional plan, so a little smaller scale than the entire watershed, but the Osi Plan for North and Central Orange County. So the purpose of the plan is to preserve an option for North and Central Orange County to, if appropriate, establish a separate region for IRWM. We haven't done that yet, but this preserves our option to do that. It creates a stronger program and stronger integration of planning within Orange County, and it also develops a project list to seek grant funding in the future. There's no current grant solicitations open, but we expect one shortly from the state for Prop 1 IRWM funding. So the Osi Plan, it identifies our water resources needs. This is a very collaborative effort, so we have a broad stakeholder outreach effort that's developed the plan. It prioritizes water management solutions to increase our local self-reliance, and it has a list of projects that have been proposed to advance the goals of the plan. So the plan went out for public comment last year from mid-November to mid-December. We received quite a few comments, 175 comments from 8 different agencies, kind of ranged from things like, text corrections, different things we had to do, some work to make sure we're meeting the state standards, just generally edits and updates that the stakeholders had recommended. So then there's a separate process that the County of Orange had a website to run this. So County of Orange had a website to submit projects. So this is putting projects into the plan. That was done from January 10th to February 31st, or February 21st of this year. So there were 56 projects submitted by 16 different agencies. So again, this was done through a county website. This is a screen capture of what the county's website looks like. So on here you can see both the plan as it's been developed, and you can also see the proposed projects. County did a great job of preparing this. So this is a map from the website, the county's website. This shows the locations of the projects that were submitted. So they're scattered throughout the North and Central Orange County area. Again, the central, when we refer to central, that's the area that's tributary to Newport Bay. So in terms of adoption of the plan, the Department of Water Resources guidelines require the plan be adopted by 3 agencies. So that's proposed to be the county, Orange County Sanitation District, and OCWD. Both the county staff and OCSD staff are conceptually good with this. They'll be taking it to their boards in the next few months. So in terms of adoption of the plan also, it was reviewed by the Newport Bay Watershed Executive Committee. So this is an advisory group for the Newport Bay Watershed. They don't have an approval role, but they have an advisory role. So they reviewed it at a meeting in March, and they recommend to appropriate agencies that the agencies adopt it. So that would include recommending to the county or to the cities in the Newport Bay Watershed area. To prepare the plan, we had a consultant supporting us. So the county was the lead. We're working extensively with the county. We also had a consultant that we hired to provide to this effort. So originally had a budget of $58,000 with a cost share. The cost share of this cost is the Newport Bay Watershed Executive Committee and OCSD. The reason the county wasn't cost sharing this part is the county was doing other work like preparing the website, and they're also leading the DAC, or Disadvantaged Communities, part of the plan. So we had to have some additional work done. There was some additional work that wasn't in the original scope. There were some conference calls with the local stakeholders we asked the consultant to participate in. There was some additional research to meet the state standards, and the volume of public comments were greater than we originally anticipated. So the total cost of this additional work was $8,900. We're responsible for a 1/3 share of that, roughly $2,900. So DDBR guidelines require that we have what's called a Regional Water Management Group, RWMG, that is proposed to be OCWD, OCSD, and the county. So again, the other two agencies' staff have conceptually agreed to do this. They'll be taking this to their boards in the future. What this group does is it oversees implementation of the plan. So we'll be bringing this back to you later. There's currently an MOU being drafted that would lay out how this works. So we expect to be bringing this back to the board for separate consideration. So our recommendation to agendize for the next board meeting is adoption of the plan and authorizing the additional cost with our consultant. That concludes my presentation. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Can you, regarding the public comments, can you give us just some sense of who the public was that became aware of this, that made
Sure.
comments?
Marcia, can you help me out with that? Who commented, like which agencies were commenting on?
We did, most of the comments came from individual cities who staff reviewed the plans.
In terms of our stakeholder meetings, I would say our cities and local water districts were the most active.
Okay, and then regarding the Newport Bay Watershed Executive Committee, what interest does Lake Forest and Costa Mesa and Santa Ana have, since they're all landlocked and have, at least it seems to me, no direct connection to the sedimentation of that's described as the mission and purpose of the executive committee, sedimentation problem of the Back Bay?
So the Newport Bay Watershed Executive Committee originally started kind of with a sediment management perspective, but they now have an advisory role for the surface water quality issues in the Newport Bay area. So the cities that have area that drains into Newport Bay, like Costa Mesa or Santa Ana, and I believe Lake Forest also, they have land that's in the area tributary to Newport Bay. So they have a role in the implementation of the surface water management issues, such as the total maximum daily load issues. So they participate in that group.
So their interest in this regional water management group would be how whatever policy is developed here would influence the drainage of those surface areas of land into those tributary systems?
Yes, and in particular the surface water quality issues. So with Newport Bay, there's like selenium issues, there's other pesticide, and there's regulatory issues that are being driven by state and federal surface water quality issues. So the cities and the participants in the Newport Bay Watershed Executive Committee have an interest and a role there.
We had previously discussed membership in this group, and I don't recall what the outcome of that was. Do you recall? Or if we, for example, could have a board member appointed?
We'd had discussions of that. I believe it was going to go back to further outreach to the county staff. So the county staff, who are the staff for the committee is Orange County staff. And so it was going to go back to having more discussions with them about our potential role. The initial feedback from them was that if we wanted to participate, they wanted to see a real active role, like what our purpose would be. So we had some dialogue, but that's where it stands.
To me, since we're the basin manager and manage all of, or at least the primary sources of tributary sources to the system that feeds the basin, it seems to me like we should have a primary role in this Newport Watershed Executive Committee. And since we have the technical and scientific resources here to put real horsepower behind the policy initiatives, and that those same policies developed here would influence our policies directly, it seems to me it'd be very logical. If it'd be kind enough, perhaps we could agendize that membership for future consideration at a committee.
What we'll do is we'll write a formal letter to Amanda Carr at the county requesting that perhaps we become a member. As Greg said, though, this is more of a surface water issue. In other words, they're looking at, they have TMDLs that they have to meet, and the cities probably have to meet for the waters that drain off city streets and are discharged to these creeks that then are tributary to the Back Bay. I think that that's their driving concern, is water quality in the Back Bay. But we are involved in a couple projects to divert some of that stream flow into the Orange County Sanitation District sewers to be then treated at Plant 1, and that so far has been the extent of our involvement, is trying to capture some of the surface water runoff that goes into the creeks to divert it so it doesn't get in the Back Bay and degrade the water quality of the Back Bay. So I mean, that's kind of our role, and we'll emphasize that and see what sort of comments we get back from the county.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll formally write a letter if that's
Sure,
okay.
that'd be great.
Any other questions from the board? Anybody in the audience have any questions, comments? Any comments from the board?
We need a motion on this, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll make the a motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Director Green?
Yes.
Director Whitaker?
Yes.
Director Vanderbilt? Yes. Director Sarmiento?
Yes.
Director Dwayne?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Now moving on to the budget.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We've had a couple of discussions now with the board regarding the budget, and the most recent one at the last board meeting. As a result of that, staff had told the board that they'd come up with some alternate ideas and discuss those. So we're bringing forward some, I guess, a fourth option, a different option that, and are mainly looking to seek committee input as to whether this may meet the needs of the committee or the board. So John is going to give it a whack.
Okay. Good morning. And just to add to what Mike said, next Wednesday we have a public hearing for the board that's scheduled to set the rates, to consider approving the budget. And on this Friday, staff needs to put out a document with a recommendation to the board. So we're trying to kind of hone in on a recommendation staff can get out this Friday in the board packet that you can act on next Wednesday. So this new option 4, we received a lot of comments from the board last Wednesday night, and so we tried to take all those comments and package it into this new option 4. So the first item was we've taken 73,000 acre-feet of in-lieu water from MWD this year. We've already paid for 60,000 of the 73. We put that on our commercial paper program. So we have this remaining 13,000 acre-feet of water that we've taken that we need to pay for. And per the agreement with Matt, we have the next 4 years to pay for this water. But if you defer payment, then you pay for it at a future MET rate. MET rates are going up about 3% a year. So it does make more sense to try to pay for this 13,000 acre-feet of water as soon as you can at the current MET rate of $6.95. So this option 4 is recommending to pay for all of this water next year at the current MET rate, and not to push off payment of this water into future years. So that's the first item. The second is recommending to defer a capital improvement project. It's the $2.5 million Prado Sediment Management Project. We would defer that to fiscal year 1920. This project this project would support going up to the 505 year-round elevation for storing water behind Prado Dam. But we do think we could defer this for 1 year.
John, just
Sure.
if I may jump in here on that specific project, a couple things involved with that project. We were awarded a grant through Prop 84 for this project. We've gone to SOPA and asked that we get an extension on the schedule for the project. So we believe that we shouldn't be in jeopardy with a 1-year deferral. The other thing is we are still trying to get this project permitted through the Corps. We have had some success at moving it forward, but it has gone back and forth with Fish and Wildlife. We're still trying to get the Corps. We just received comments back from the Corps Council on the biological opinion. So the biological opinion is back with Fish and Wildlife right now. We're not sure whether it's going to go through another round of comment there or not. But even if Fish and Wildlife were to accept the Corps' changes, it still would have to go through the Corps approval process to get the permit. So this project, the sediment management, was always going to be a two-phase project where we would go in the fall and clear and grub so the 20-acre site, in essence, take all the trees and the brush and get rid of it, and then come in the following year with a sediment removal process. So it's a 2-year project. The problem is we would just about have to start advertising to award the project in order to construct it this fall. So we're running up against several roadblocks on this project right now. So deferring it at 1 year is probably a reasonable approach.
The third item here is the PAYGO program. So right now we have $7 million in our PAYGO program. So $7 million is built into our rate structure. So every year we get $7 million of revenue, and we use that to pay for smaller capital projects instead of using long-term debt for those capital projects. So that's how the PAYGO program works. We've been wanting to get the PAYGO program up to about $10 million a year, and so we had recommended to increase the PAYGO program from $7 million up to $8 million for next year. But with this option 4, we're saying we could decrease the PAYGO program. Instead of taking it up to 8, reduce it down to $4 million. And then the $4 million will match the remaining CIP projects in the proposed budget that would be funded by the PAYGO program. And I have a table that also describes this on how we got to $4 million. Regarding the replenishment assessment, it would increase from $445 to $462 per acre foot. The basin production percentage, we would bump it up 2% from 75% to 77%. That 2% increase will allow about an additional 8,000 acre feet of groundwater pumping, and then that has the impact of reducing the recommended RA increase. But then we're thinking this would just be for 1 year to go up to 77, and then most likely in future years we'd recommend coming back down to 75%. And then the other thing what this does is we're recommending to increase the RA, but by also increasing the BPP increase almost completely offsets the RA increase on the producer's water supply cost. So from the producer's point of view, they're almost neutral with their groundwater, with their water supply cost, because we're also raising the BPP with this recommendation. And then the accumulated overdraft would decrease, which means water storage levels would increase by a planned amount of 6,000 to 30,000 acre feet. And then I have a table showing how we came up with those numbers. So with respect to the capital improvement program, And there's 2 pages here. A couple smaller projects over here. The total is just under $50 million. But for the capital improvement program, all the projects, these 3 projects that are shown in orange font, GWS final expansion, mid-basin injection, and the Alameda seawater barrier, these 3 projects are funded with long-term debt. And the payments for that long-term debt will hit the district in the future. The other projects shown in white font, these are what would be paid for with the PAYGO program. And then, as we mentioned, we would defer the Prado Sediment Management Project. So, if you add up all the projects to be funded with the PAYGO program, they total $6.5 million. And then we're saying defer the Prado project at $2.5 million. So that leaves a remaining $4 million of projects funded by PAYGO. And then that's why we're saying you could take the PAYGO program from $7 million down to $4 million. So you'd have $4 million of revenue from PAYGO, and you'd have $4 million of projects funded by PAYGO. And then with respect to where we think the basin overdraft would end up, this is the chart, the table we've been showing the board the last few weeks. And it shows the different sources of water that we expect to get into the groundwater basin: base flows, storm flows, incidental recharge. And then we have the 2 columns. We have what we're calling conservative figures. And then this column over here are using average numbers. For base flow, the average over the last 5 years has been about 70,000. And then we were using 65,000 to be a little bit conservative. For storm flows and incidental recharge, these 2 sources of water are directly tied to rainfall. And as I mentioned before, the conservative figures that we were using, there's about a 70% chance we'll do better based on recent hydrology we've experienced using the conservative figures. But if you use, here's what the averages have been for storm flows and incidental recharge over the last 15 to 20 years. So you can come down and see the total amount of water that would be recharged into the groundwater basin. In the conservative column, 328,000 acre feet. Using the averages, we'd get about 352,000 acre feet of water into the basin. With basin pumping at a 77% BPP, this is slightly higher, 322,000. So with the conservative column, you're getting about 6,000 acre feet planned refill into the basin. Using averages, 30,000 acre feet. So we're still in a pretty good position of, probably recharging the basin some amount next year. And then the overdraft slide that we've been looking at a lot. And again, we've predicted that the overdraft at the end of the fiscal year we're in right now will be around 287,000 acre feet. And this means the basin is still relatively empty. The basin is only about 43% full with an overdraft of 287,000 acre feet. We're starting at this point, and that's why staff is recommending to still be relatively conservative in how we manage the basin. But then we did project out what we think could happen over the next 5 years using average hydrology and also going back to a 75% BPP starting in fiscal year 1920. But we still would be making progress in getting the groundwater basin full. It'd take about 5 years. And then we also show if we had wet hydrology, things would be a whole lot better. Mother Nature would be helping us quickly refill the basin. That's shown in this dashed line. But then, more importantly, if we went into an extended drought period and got well below average hydrology, with this conservative approach, we don't fall too much. The basin overdraft over about 5 years of dry hydrology, we're around 340,000 acre feet. So that's one of the benefits of being relatively conservative, that if we go through an extended dry period, water levels will not fall too much in the basin.
I'd just like to reiterate on that last slide. I think that some of those lines are a little misleading, the wet and the normal, refilling the basin in a few years. We're in a current water year where we have 3 3/4 inches to date and of accumulated rainfall, and the average by the end of June is 13 inches. We're not going to see much more rain between now and then. So we're probably going to end up with 4 inches of rainfall this year, which would be a historic low. We had a wet year last year. The 2 prior years, we had about 5 inches of rainfall. So although staff is recommending increasing the BPP by 2% this year, I think we would be very reluctant to recommend anything much higher than that. We also purchased 135,000 acre-feet of met water last year, and we gained 50,000 on the overdraft. So that tells you that we didn't fill the basin as much as we thought we would, purchasing that amount of water. So I think that we need to err a little bit on the side of caution and not get too carried away. We will. The one thing that John didn't do, projecting maybe 4 years down the line when the GWRS final expansion comes online, our projections show increasing the BPP from 75 to 80%. So there will be an increase once we bring that additional supply online. And that's why, as I say, I just want to, we consider this a 1-year recommendation. We would consider going back to the board's policy of a 75% BPP next year, and hopefully we'll get some rain next winter to get a little bit more incidental recharge into the basin. So I just wanted to make those comments in closing.
Any questions? Audience, any questions? Please.
All my questions are on those ones. We sent you all a letter last night that just simply points out that there's some value to taking a long-term view in terms of managing the basin and the cost of water. And this option 4 would result in having to pay more for 8,000 acre-feet of water in the future than we can pay today. So we feel that the staff's original proposal was a good balance of the basin policy or your operating policies as well as the management basin. So keeping the BPP at 75 and going for an RA 472 would be a good balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
Kevin Cook from Huntington Beach, just a resident, but I would also like to second that I strongly believe that we should stay with the original staff proposal. The long-term pain is going to be infinitely more than this short-term pain that these 3 cities seem to get to. And I don't think we should hold ourselves hostage because of their reluctance to pass on the rate to their constituents. Because you guys have spent the last number of years talking about Poseidon and the amount that that's going to increase the RA is huge compared to this little penny $27. And so it just seems amazing that you would not continue to fill the basin as much as you can into the basin instead of buying really expensive water from a decent project.
Anybody else?
Quick question.
Okay. Yes.
The deferment of the projects, would that affect the final expansion?
No.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Sorry, just one comment about the option of paying the met water faster. We appreciate the fact that staff looked at that and support that goal and objective, whatever that means. So paying for the water at a discount. In fact, if we can pay it in the first 6 months before that increases it on January, it's a high value bid.
Remember, we can't buy any more. Met cut us off. We were actually going to buy more, so we had no choice in that. Okay. Any other comments? Yes.
Just to clarify, the 13, we are not deferring payment for the 13,000 extra acre feet, right? We're paying for it at today's rate.
Yes, it would be included in the budget in July, and we would pay for the 13,000 before the end of this calendar year.
Perfect. And then just broad picture speaking, does anybody recall what the maximum BPP has ever been? What is the highest it's ever been?
4 or 82? 88?
It was 80% in 07, 08, but I think there was a year where it was 84% back in the early 90s. I'd have to go back and look.
And then does anybody recall, roughly speaking, what the maximum total water demand from the basin was?
Total maximum pumping?
Yeah, maximum pumping, extraction.
Yeah, it was around 360,000. I'd have to go back and get it, but it's in that area.
Roughly is good enough. So my question is this, and I suspect I know the answer, but so we took the GWRS water and we're putting 100,000 extra acre feet of water into the basin, and so back in those days we were also, roughly speaking, putting about 300,000 acre feet of water in the basin, right?
Yeah, and base flows were a lot higher to allow that, yes. Yeah.
Assuming all things were equal today as they were then, the basin should be much higher, but for the fact that the base flow down the river has declined dramatically, right? So I'm trying to figure out, if we were putting 300,000 acre feet of water in the basin back then and we didn't have GWS and we're still putting 300,000 acre feet of, where is the difference in supply? And I think it's the base flow in the river.
It is. Base flow in the river 10 years ago was 150,000 acre feet a year.
And it's 60 is what we're using
70
average today.
Well, yeah, we're using 65,000 as an average, I think.
Because the best fit line of the mean of the base flow has been declining so significantly. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
And where we're picking up some of the slack is with GWRS, right?
Absolutely.
So we have this window right now with the expansion of GWRS, which will increase our volume potential in just a few years. So that's that gap that we're looking to address right now, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So I wanted to thank staff for sharpening their pencils and looking at different options and listening to some of the board comments. I think, this is the process, right? This is what we're supposed to do. This is what we're, vested to do, which is to look at different iterations, I guess, of how we can get to some objectives. To some folks, I guess, it's easy to say, let's just have everybody suck it up. Let's just have everybody deal with it. But I guess, some people don't understand that this area that we represent is varied, right? So you have some folks who have a very low AMI and others that don't. So to suck it up is very difficult to tell a family that has a difficult time making payments, and these costs add up. So we have to make sure that we're very careful in how we approach this. So I think the approach in option 4 is very balanced. I think it's, to John's comments, it looks like it's neutral to the producers. We're still going to be recharging the basin. We're still trying to meet our objectives that we set out to do. This is a temporary approach, and so next year we're going to have to do this again, like we do every year. So I think there isn't any harm in considering all our options. One thing that I didn't see here is anything having to do with the general fund. If there's anything there that we could maybe thin out, but I don't. It's interesting because you would think the public would be saying, look, let's try to find as much relief as possible, and let's see if there's any way we can cut some fat from budgets, and that's what we do in cities all the time. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that this is somehow a bad approach or a negative approach. I think, if anything, staff has been very responsive to some of the questions, and I certainly appreciate it. And I think that what this does is it gives us another version of how we can approach this issue, that many of us represent constituents that are barely able to pay their rent, barely able to purchase food for their kids. And sometimes I find some of the comments that I hear from folks kind of offensive because, they don't understand that there is a balance that we have to strike here. And, what looks like pennies adds up. And, we're dealing with a homeless crisis in the county, so it's very visible to all of us that some folks are barely able to make ends meet. So, I'm just shocked by some of the comments I've heard throughout the counties from some folks, and I'm offended by some of the comments I hear even in our agency.
Just to comment also, Director Sarmiento, tomorrow at the Admin Finance Committee meeting, we will be reviewing the general fund portion of the budget. So we're still in that process of reviewing the budget.
I think I brought this up before, but I want to make that request again, that we're bending over backward to try to save money for the residents. But can we look into like the producers' rates? Because I think maybe some producers, despite we're saving the money for them, but it's not being passed on, and they still hike up the rates just so that they have a more secure budget for the water. And I don't think that's fair for us to take all this heat and then turn around, they still spike up their rates. And I'd like to make sure that we keep track of that so that it's a requirement that when we save money for them, that they need to pass it on to the residents.
That's interesting. Yes.
Just following up on Director Wynn's comment, I know of one producer in particular that their water department, they charge the fees to the residents. They then transfer money to their general fund and pay for a licensing fee to put their water plants in the street. I'll let them be unnamed. But it's our second largest pumper that does that. So, it's, to her point, it's not exactly fair to try to tag us or MODOC with the issue of water rates. So,
any other comments? Jakes? No? You're going to miss your chance. Okay, I too want to thank staff. I know when I first proposed some of these things, I saw some people, some big eyes thinking, what is she doing? But I think this has come up to a really, really good compromise and something that really works for everyone. And I think Director Sarmiento right away had said he was really in favor of us going in this direction. I had said 80% off the top of my head, and I was just trying to get it to raise up. I wasn't for any particular amount, and then you made that clear. And so I think that there's been a lot of hard work on this, a lot of balancing. And so I'm very, very pleased. Thank you all for doing this, because I know it was a hard job. You had everything done, everything ready to go, and then we changed it all at the last minute. So we have do we have a motion?
Well, this is just an informational item.
Oh, that's right.
So we just wanted to kind of get a feel at the committee level if there were any huge issues with what we were preparing today. It's a lot easier to have the conversation, I think, ahead of time rather than having it on, and we'll still have the conversation the night of the vote. But in order to get things, it helps staff clarify in our minds what our recommendation will be next week to the board when we go through the ritual of the RA, ARA, BEA, BPP, and budget. Those are the items that we'll be asking you to consider at next Wednesday's board meeting.
One final comment before we leave. I certainly concur with Councilmember Sarmiento with the amount of wrestling that we're doing with our budgets at the city level. And also Director Wynn's approach of making sure if we are trying to minimize from this level that is felt by ratepayers ultimately as well. But I think this exercise is more than an exercise. It's an opportunity for us each time. On a one-year basis here, the range differential of impact to the basin is minimal. And we can always make course corrections going forward. You've given us a much better view of the projections and what the total impact of your projections, the best numbers you can come up with are. I appreciate that information. So it is a fairly difficult call because it is going against some earlier principles that we've established. But,
I'd like to ask our attorney if is it possible to put any conditions or anything on our RAs and BPPs or even ARA?
The short answer is no. I mean, we can ask, we can hint, but we have no ability to enforce any sort of a condition that and remember, producers covers a spectrum from a small backyard orchard to a large city or water agency, and the Act talks in terms of management for producers. It doesn't talk in terms of the district managing producers.
Do we, or have we ever just made public what the water rates are from each one of our producers?
Well, there's an annual survey that's done.
Right.
What each producer charges. But one thing to keep in mind is a producer's cost, only about 25% is groundwater. The other 75% of a producer's cost is running their system, operating their system, their administration, buying met water. So what we do only affects about 25% of the producer's cost. So they have that other 75% of the cost that may be going up or down.
True. That's true.
Yeah, so.
Are we, I think the second part of this discussion is the basin storage operating range evaluation.
That is the next item on the agenda, and it looks like Roy Herndon, John Sang, is going to be giving the presentation.
Come on, John.
There you are. There you are. You don't want to give this one, John?
John's not moving.
This is easier than the budget, I think.